Hi guys, it's TTL back with another rush kit for you. Now we're trying the new cameras out today, and that's why I've gone back to give a quick look of the 2060 Strix, and then I'm going to talk you through a couple of points, but I'm also going to do a bit of a comparison visually with some of the higher end cards as well, because it's actually quite interesting how similar these are to the much more expensive cards like the 2080 and the 2080 Ti. Now what I do want to do is start on the back of the card, because actually, no, what we'll do is I'll say, to start off with, you can see above and below the fans, the three fans that are included, you can see the little strips, and these light up with RGB. If you've not seen a Strix card before, then that's one of your RGB areas. Then if you flip the card over, you can see you've got Republic of Gamers on the side. That's also configurable with RGB, and so is the ROG Eye on the back plate. But the reason why I've started here is to also draw attention to the little button down at the bottom near the like the area where you bolt the card in, what I would call the PCI slot area. There is a button that you can just switch the lights off completely. If you do want to use the RGB side of things, you do need to install the ROG Aura software on your machine so it can change the colours, otherwise it will just cycle on its own. But with that switch that's hardwired into the back of the card there, if you don't want any RGB at all, you don't need to install any software, and you can just turn it off. So that keeps things nice and easy. Just to the left of that switch, you can see a BIOS switch, so you can set up a couple of different profiles and two different BIOSes, or if you mess up one BIOS, you can flick to the other and use it as like a recovery mode. And to the right of it, you can see there are voltage reading points there for those of you that are really into your overclocking. Now, one thing I would like to say is you can see the width of the card, or the depth, the area that it comes away from the PCB. That's actually quite big. It's over 2 slots, closer to 3 slots than it is 2. It's got a lot of depth to it. And if you flip the card over again, you can see from the other side, even with that big giant brace at the front of the card there, you can still see quite how substantial this cooler is. If we pan along as well, you can see it's not just a big heatsink, it does actually come into direct contact with the hot points on the board, and this does help to keep the VRM temperatures down, and it also helps to keep the board much more stable over time. This also allows it to be able to run incredibly quietly as well. And if you want to go and see any performance or any stuff like that, please do go to the Overclock 3D website where you can see the full review on this. Lots more pictures, but this is the only video that we're going to be doing for this one right now. Okay, so talking about the cooler, it's rather substantial, and there's a reason for that, and it's exactly the same as what's used on the 70, the 80 and the Ti, bar some slight differences with the way it contacts with the power regs, and there only are very minimal, but you can pretty much swap between them. And the only way to actually tell between them is a couple of really small, kind of silly points. The 2060 has a 6-pin and an 8-pin power connector, and if you have a look around the back of the card, you can see that there are 2 HDMIs and 2 display ports. Now, if we were looking at one of the more expensive cards, it would also have a USB Type-C on the back, and it would be 2 8-pin power connectors. So if we put the cards side by side, it's fairly easy to see that there's really not a great deal between them, which is something that for the 2060 owners is actually going to be really good, because it's going to mean that your purchase is going to look a lot more expensive than it possibly could be. And the only tiny details, like I said, are the connectors. When we've got them side by side like that, you can see the depth of the card is the same. You can see that the length of the card is exactly the same. It's really just those the power connectors that are different. And for the eagle-eyed amongst you, if you were to have it in a vertical rig, you can see that the fans on the 2060 are the previous generation fans, whereas the 2080 that we're using is the comparison card. You can see it's got the ring around the outside of the fans, and they're the newer generation 20 series fans. It's the length, it's the weight, it's the depth, it's got all of those things going for it. Like I said, because the 2060 doesn't create as much heat, that makes things a lot better for the performance. Pretty much the fans on it are just not really having to work very hard at all, which makes it incredibly quiet. and it also means that there's when it comes to the normal boosting technologies of the NVIDIA cards, it does incredibly well. And if you're not that au fait with overclocking and being able to use the offsets, a really good way to get a decent, reliable boost is just to turn the power percentage dial up a little bit in the GPU tweak software, and what that will end up doing is it will give you a higher sustained boost, so your average boost will go up a fair bit, and that is where you unlock the performance with these cards. But it's a cracking looking card. It is one of the more expensive of the 2060s that are out on the market, coming in between 429 and 449. But this is the top of the range Asus card, and you can get the dual and the turbo below these significantly cheaper and more down closer to the MSRP of the 349 that the 2060 come out with. But there's not that much ROG tax when you think about the fact it's sat on a 2080/2080 Ti PCB with the same heatsink, and the only real difference between the cooling side of things is the fans, but it didn't need the higher end fans at all anyway, because if you go and have a look at the main review that I said to you about, the click link is underneath. The performance was epic. So without further ado, because this was just meant to be a rush kit, this is the tiniest one, and I'm off, I'm out, I'm gone.